Now, the new chair of the House Republican Congress, Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us this morning. You just heard your colleague invoke your father in this debate over vulgarity and impeachment. And I know you've said this, some of the rhetoric you've seen over the last week shows the Democrats are radical and out of touch. But do you think this is something you all can push successfully, given the president's own record?
Hey, George. Well, thanks for having me on. You know, I think that the key thing about what we heard from the Congresswoman this week is the fact that she's, very focused on a politically motivated impeachment. I think what Adam Smith was saying in terms of the seriousness of impeachment is absolutely true. And so, I think we've got to all look at exactly what the Democrats plan to do here. You had Speaker Pelosi in her remarks accepting the speakership talk about the importance of working across the aisle to get things done. And then just a mere few hours later, you had video of Congresswoman Tlaib. So, look, I think that at the end of the day, they need to understand and recognize that impeachment is not a political thing. It never should be, that it tears at the very fabric of our Constitution if it is. And to be pronouncing on that issue, just having been sworn in without having any evidence at all, can't be anything but political. So I think that's the key thing in terms of what we saw over the course of the last few days.
Let's talk about the shutdown. You just heard Congressman Smith say that he does believe the president does have the power, the legal authority, to declare a national emergency, have the military build the wall. Should he invoke it?
Nobody wants him to invoke it, and I don't believe the president wants to invoke it. We all hoped, frankly, that once Speaker Pelosi had secured the votes to become speaker on the floor, that her willingness to negotiate would, be more evident, that she would be willing to come to the table to do what's right for the American people. Unfortunately, what we've seen over the last few days is she's very much just completely captive to the far party. And so where I was interested to hear my colleague on the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Smith, talk about the fact that there already is a wall, but that's a very different point than the one that Speaker Pelosi continues to make, which is that a wall is immoral. What we believe in the Republican side of the House is what's immoral is not to secure our borders, not to protect the people of this nation. The president has no more important obligation. Those of us who are elected officials in Congress have no more important obligation. We absolutely have got to secure the borders. And at this point, the Democrats continue to play games. There were meetings yesterday where Secretary Nielsen was able to lay out the security concerns at the border, the very real security concerns, drugs, crime, human trafficking. And we're hopeful there's going to be another meeting again today. But we've got to see the games stop. And this is not an issue of, who's doing what and who has the upper hand. The border has got to be secured. That's what the American people want to see, and they want the partisanship to end.
And you saw Congressman Smith say that he believes the Democrats have paid attention to border security. How do you answer his broader point that the president is asking the American taxpayers to pay for a campaign promise he broke, that Mexico would pay for the wall?
The president has talked about that. The president has talked about the extent to which we're going to see increased economic benefit from the renegotiated trade agreements with Mexico. But I'm sure that the Democrats are not taking the position that we should sit by and do nothing. I can't believe that that's a position that they plan to take to the voters. So I think especially when you look at the fact that in the past, many of them, including their current leadership, have voted for a barrier, for a wall, for border security, have bragged about the fact that they've done that. There's no question but that when you've got caravans, when you've got illegal immigrants, when you've got our Border Patrol agents being attacked, when you've got our Border Patrol agents asking for enhanced security at the border, including a wall, including barriers, that's what we ought to be doing. And we really need to playing these political games and just get it done. Well,
they would say they're ready to approve at least $1 billion in border security. It does seem that there's right now some breaks in the Republican ranks. 3 Republican senators have now said they want the government to open first, and then you can continue negotiations. Your own colleague in the House, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, says it's Congress's basic job to fund the government. This should happen on a different track. What's your answer to that?
It is our job to fund the government, and it is also our job to make sure that we secure the border, to make sure that we provide for the security of the nation. And the Democrats, could any moment now, they control now the floor of the House. So instead of playing games where they strip out one bill and strip out another bill and try to play, partisanship on the floor of the House, they ought to do what they've agreed to do in the past, and that is provide the appropriations to secure the border. We've got a huge number of critically important national security issues we're facing. This is one of them. We're facing a huge challenge from China, from Russia, from Iran, from ISIS. We need to be in a position where we can turn our attention to those, where we can make sure that we've got the border secured and that we're doing everything possible to provide the security the nation needs as a whole and stop with the political games.
The president talked about national security this week as well. We just heard Congressman Smith on Syria. I want to show what the president said in the cabinet meeting about Afghanistan.
Russia used to be the Soviet Union. Afghanistan made it Russia because they went bankrupt fighting in Afghanistan. The reason Russia was in Afghanistan was because terrorists were going into Russia. They were right to be there.
Russia right to be in Afghanistan?
No. Obviously, I disagree with the president's assessment of the history there. The Soviets went into Afghanistan as part of the Brezhnev Doctrine. They were determined to spread communism around the globe. And what bankrupted the Soviet Union was Ronald Reagan and his determination to support those who were fighting on behalf of freedom around the globe, to fight back against the Soviet communists, and also his determination to build the Strategic Defense Initiative to bankrupt the Soviets by forcing them to have to put more and more resources into their military. So I think at the end of the day, that's clearly what bankrupted the Soviet Union, and that's they were in Afghanistan because they were, very much adherents to the Brezhnev Doctrine. But I would also say, when I listened to my colleague, Congressman Smith, talk about what the Armed Services Committee is going to be focused on, I really do hope that he will not direct the committee to be focused simply on, political attacks on President Trump. I think that we as a nation face too many huge challenges, and it is certainly the role of the House Armed Services Committee to conduct oversight, but it's also, as we do that, our role to make sure that the Defense Department is doing everything it needs to do to modernize. I am certainly hopeful that we will not see Congressman Smith support cutting the defense budget. We've just begun to rebuild after the devastation of the Obama years, and we've got to continue on that trajectory and on that path. We face tremendous challenges from adversaries who have got weapon systems we cannot defend against, and we will be falling down in our duty if we fail to do what's right to make sure we're conducting oversight and appropriations to continue to keep the nation safe.
Is the administration in the right place now on Syria?
I've said that the United States should not pull out of Syria. I've been very hopeful as I've seen reports that we are now going to slow that down. We've got about 2,200 special operations forces there, and they are conducting crucially important work in terms of air support, in terms of artillery support. It is their presence that has really helped the Kurds be effective in terms of the battle against ISIS. And it would be really devastating if we were to pull out precipitously, and if we were to have a situation where the Iranians were given free rein, really establish a land bridge there and control and dominate Syria. That would be counter to our interests. It would allow ISIS to begin to, again, form safe havens potentially, and it would not serve the interests of our ally, Israel, and others in the region. So I'm hopeful that we will, in fact, slow that down and that we will look at conditions on the ground and not make a precipitous withdrawal.
Congresswoman, thanks for your time this morning.